Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. Speaking from the capital of N'Djamena on Sunday, Chad President Deby and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu officially announced the resumption of diplomatic ties between the two nations. This during Netanyahu's brief but historic visit to Chad as the first sitting Israeli Prime Minister to do so. It also follows Deby's surprise visit to Israel in November last year. But this means that Israel now has formal diplomatic relations with a record 161 world nations, and according to the two leaders, this newest partnership will be greatly beneficial for both. At their joint conference, Netanyahu spoke of all the important trade that is now to come. But in addition to such surface benefits, the Israeli premier again reiterated how important it is for Israel to expand relations both within Africa and within the Arab and Muslim world. And perhaps as evidence of Israel's growing inroads in Africa at least, the Prime Minister's flight was allowed to return home over South Sudanese airspace, which is controlled by Northern Sudan, a nation that has no diplomatic ties to Israel. And finally, Netanyahu promised towards the end of his speech that just a month ahead of the upcoming April elections in Israel, an Israeli delegation of various economic leaders will arrive in Chad to explore the many possibilities that President Deby and the Chad government are open to offer. Israeli Air Force fighters reportedly struck multiple Iranian, Hezbollah, and Syrian targets near Damascus Monday morning, killing 11 pro-regime and Iranian fighters. Targets included weapons storage sites, an area at the Damascus International Airport, an Iranian intelligence site, an Iranian military training camp, and multiple Syrian surface-to-air missile defense launchers. This in response to a missile being fired from Syria into the Israeli Golan Heights Sunday afternoon, though Syrian reports claim that their initial and rare daytime attack on Sunday was itself a retaliation for alleged Israeli airstrikes over the weekend. Regardless, the Iron Dome intercepted the Syrian projectile, and the IDF claimed that no one in the area was in immediate danger. Yet the IDF added that, quote, by firing towards Israeli civilians, Iran once again proved that it is attempting to entrench itself in Syria, endangering the state of Israel and regional stability. We will continue operating determinately to thwart these attempts, end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu then reiterated these comments on his way back from his landmark visit to the African nation of Chad. Army officials are clearly expecting additional return fire or some other such escalation in the region, however, as Operation Northern Shield comes to completion and Syrian state media reports against Israel's aggression. Further, following the latest pre-dawn assaults, the IDF has closed the Mount Hermon skiing area for at least a day and until further notice. Meanwhile, as Qatar's third $15 million payment to Hamas is transferred this week, in the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian officials have informed the United States that the PA will now be refusing to accept American security aid funding as soon as February 2019. This in response to the recently passed American Anti-Terrorism Cooperation Act, or ATCA. The news was broken to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in a letter written by PA Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah in December 2018. And in the letter obtained by Israeli news network Ynet, Hamdallah explains that while the PA government is grateful for past economic support, ATCA has caused the U.S. economic aid to the PA to become a, quote, dividing force. He added then that, quote, in light of these developments, the government of Palestine respectfully informs the United States government that as of January 31st, 2019, it fully disclaims and no longer wishes to accept any form of assistance referenced in ATCA, end quote. Under the new ATCA law, American courts would have expanded jurisdiction over any case and involving any foreign party accused of aiding or supporting terror, provided that that foreign party also accepts United States financial aid. This would mean dozens of cases involving American victims and tens of millions of dollars in damages could be brought against the PA and the PLO and tried successfully in American courts. So rather than ending financial payments to terrorists and their families or opening themselves up to lawsuits, the PA will stop accepting further funding completely. Today we are celebrating the Jewish holiday of TU-BISHVAT, aka New Year's for the trees. And on this day, when we celebrate life and nature, people here in Israel follow some traditions like planting trees, celebrating outside, and eating dried fruits. But this year, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development is trying to change our habits by recommending that Israelis replace the traditional dried fruit with the country's own homegrown fresh produce. The holiday of TU-BISHVAT is celebrated every year on the 15th of the Hebrew month of Shevat, and it marks the season in which the earliest blooming trees in the Holy Land begin a new fruit-bearing cycle. And the tradition of eating dried fruits, which was kept until today, dates back to the 3rd century when it was harder to get fresh fruit here in Israel, and there was no technology available to keep it fresh. But now the Minister of Agriculture, Uri Ariel, has issued a statement where he calls on Israelis to choose Israel's fresh fruits over dried fruits. Ariel explained that today most of Israel's dried fruit isn't actually even produced here, and in fact most of it comes from Turkey. So the minister is trying to encourage Israelis to support the local farmers and the country's own agricultural industry, adding that, quote, farmers are today's pioneers, and Israel's agricultural produce is among the best in the world, end quote. But that's not all. Ariel also warned about the high sugar and coloring content of dried fruit, explaining that they have much lower nutritional value than fresh fruit anyway. Similarly, in an interview with Yeshiva World News, the Sephardic Rabbi Rav Mustafi seemed to agree with Ariel and also recently advised his congregants to cut their consumption of dried fruits. Again, mostly because they contain dangerous additives, including insecticides and even sulfur dioxide. That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.